Our intelligence reports suggest that they'll try to seize one of the disputed systems along the border. We think they're gambling that the Federation won't actually go to war over one system.
Will we?
I hope we won't need to make that decision.
Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. Whether this parable is true in the real world or not is debatable, but when it comes to the Trek universe, it appears to be absolutely true. After the alliance between the Klingons and the Federation had been finalized, the member planets of the United Federation of Planets experienced a peace that hadn't been seen before. Starfleet reduced its military assets to almost nothing and began a program of pure exploration. The Federation would still face adversaries, of course. The Cardassian border war is a prime example, but a war, a true war? Well, that just didn't happen. This prosperity, also known as the Golden Age, redefined the Starfleet captains and admiralty that were in command. While Starfleet had lost its appetite for conflict, indeed willing to give up far more than is reasonable to avoid it, there were some within the fleet that could see the current era waning. Part of this, in my opinion, came not at the edge of a sword, but at the end of a pen. Metaphorically speaking. Admirals utilized the diplomatic strength of the Federation to force other governments into submission. I fully think that the Federation's diplomatic pressure caused the Bajoran withdraw. However, sometimes even diplomacy can have downsides. With the withdrawal of the Cardassians from the Bajoran sector, their forces were redistributed along the Federation border, specifically threatening Federation systems that were currently in dispute. And this is the crux of our discussion.
Admiral. With all due respect, it's not necessary to give Captain Jellico command of the Enterprise just to conduct a negotiation.
I disagree. The Enterprise will be in a dangerous situation, and I want someone on the bridge who has a great deal of experience with the Cardassians. No offense, Commander, but that's not you.
The more research I do, the more I believe that Starfleet likely never gave up completely on having military officers. It's probable that while the organization claimed to be solely scientific and appeared to only have Federation scientists, they did keep soldiers on the back burner for when the rubber met the road. One of the events that show me this is the relieving of Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise D and giving command of the vessel to Captain Edward Jellico. While I will be going over the events of the Next Generation's Chain of Command Part 1 and Part 2, know that I'm going to be more vague and glossing over them so that I can discuss Jellico's role within Starfleet and his interactions with the crew of that ship, with a particular focus on Riker. As I've alluded to, the Cardassians began pressuring the Federation along the border. Starfleet intelligence believed that the hostile nation was intent on invasion, the reasoning being that the Federation would back down if this happened. They would gain a planet to replace the loss of Bajor. Watching the episode, and knowing Starfleet, we honestly can't be really sure how the Federation was going to respond. Well, how they would have responded if an invasion by the Cardassians did actually occur. I do believe that both Admiral Nechayev and Captain Jellico would push for a conflict to prevent the annexation if it came to it, but again, Starfleet is overseen by a civilian government. A government that never has to see what's happening on the borders. All they know is peace, and if they have to give up a system to keep that peace, what's it matter? Especially if it's on the edges of the border with the Cardassians. Why should they care? I know that Jellico really believes that it will be a war, but I do wonder if in reality, it's even money on if we would have Federation capitulation. They did it with the Klingons, the Romulans, and even the Cardassians in the past, so giving away sovereignty is kind of like a cultural rite of passage for a Federation senator. Because of these well-known facts about the Federation, I do believe Nechayev assigned Jellico to the Enterprise to ensure that not only would an honest-to-God soldier be in command to defend the systems, but she placed someone she knew was a war dog that realized that allowing a sector to be consumed by the Cardassian wasn't something that could be permitted, even if the Federation civilian government was willing to allow it. Let's discuss Jellico for a moment.
Do any of you know Edward Jellico?
He is the commanding officer of the Cairo. I've heard of him. I don't know that any of us have ever...
I'm giving him command of the Enterprise this afternoon. Captain Jellico helped to negotiate the original armistice 2 years ago, and I believe he's the most qualified person to lead this mission.
The captain is honestly of a similar stripe to Benjamin Sisko, at least in my opinion. There are differences, of course, but Captain Jellico is willing to do what must be done. He sees Starfleet as a military institution and runs the vessels under his command as such. He requires that the vessel be at top efficiency and ready for a fight. The crew were required to be at the top of their game if they were going to serve under him. He drastically downsized departments to bolster security. This, of course, would cause some backlash. The Enterprise, Bride of the Fleet, had been created to allow for families and exploration. It was literally an apartment complex in space. The fact that it was now being transformed into an environment where everyone was solely focused on defending the vessel and preparing for a battle was jarring. While there are a couple of incidents we could see with most of the crew, the most well-known is the confrontations between Riker and Jellico.
Are you questioning my judgment, Commander?
As first officer, it is my responsibility to point out any actions that may be mistakes by a commanding officer, sir.
Then maybe it's time you found other responsibilities. You're relieved. Don't make me confine you to quarters as well.
And honestly, this entire episode paints Riker in a very, very bad light. When you combine this with his treatment of Reg Barclay from an earlier video essay I did, I'm not sure why everyone is such a fan of the officer. He's way too emotional and wanting everything to be quote-unquote fun to really be of service here. An example of this is while Riker states he doesn't want to give up systems, planets, or sectors for one man, he certainly seems dead set on saving Picard regardless. It gets so bad that his ego requires Captain Jellico to ask him to save the day. He doesn't volunteer. I honestly think this was a very poor outing for the commander. To be fair, I don't agree with Jellico that he's a bad executive officer, but he's not a wartime XO. At least not right now. On that topic, looking at Jellico and how he handles the situation, he certainly believes that being aggressive with the Cardassians is how you get results. He's standoffish, attempting to keep the Cardassians on the back foot. He doesn't attempt to negotiate by giving in, but shows an outward hostility. And to be honest, I think, for the most part, this is successful. Even when Picard is exposed and Starfleet's covert operations uncovered, Jellico continues to keep a straight edge. He does this even when he isn't completely confident. It is, in my opinion, the sign of a good officer. Jellico certainly has doubts, but he wants to make sure that he does what's best for everyone, even if it comes at the expense of Picard, but he does doubt himself. Honestly, he'd be psychopathic if he didn't. The one thing I love about Jellico is that I do believe he's willing to win a war and do what it takes to ensure a Federation victory, but he's not looking for a war.
Beverly, you'll need to...
have sickbay ready for the casualties you're about to send me.
That's right. Dismissed.
The best example of this, I believe, is in the interaction between him and Dr. Crusher. The Doctor, deciding to pretend to be a 21st century Doctor for some reason, is pretentious and hostile towards him when she learns of his plan to set mines next to the hull of Cardassian ships that are in a nebula. To be fair, most of the senior staff agree with her. They think that maybe the Cardassians are there for some kind of scientific research. And honestly, I'm sure if they existed in the 1930s, they probably would have cautioned Churchill against war with Hitler, stating that Germany was just reclaiming states it rightfully owned and really did need all of those airplanes to deliver the mail. Because apparently, you get to hold the stupid stick if you're assigned to the Enterprise and your name isn't Jellico. Anyway, the senior staff stupidity aside, Jellico does order that the nebula be mined, and once it is, he contacts the Cardassians. Now here's the important piece. He doesn't blow all of them to hell. He doesn't even project that he wants a war with them. He just lets the Cardassian commander know of the Cardassians' tactical disadvantage, and he gives them the choice on what they want to do. He does set one of the mines off to show that he's not lying, but is then open to negotiation. I honestly think this was his plan all along. I don't think he ever intended to use them, at least hoped that he wouldn't have to. Now he would if the Cardassians attacked him first, but for me, this is the pinnacle of what a Starfleet War Dog is. Even when he is in a position to annihilate the enemy and ensure no war could ever take place, he still holds back to give them one last chance. And that's not to mention that he gets Picard back. Now, all of this said, there is one thing that I think Riker got right that Jellico got wrong, and that was, of course, attempting to save Picard. wants to go looking for the wayward captain. It wasn't unreasonable to believe that Picard was dead, but it was still worth investigating. However, I became extremely perplexed when Jellico said no after the revelation that the man was alive. I can somewhat understand from a military point of view not allowing them to go, because sending another team is effectively spending good money after bad, but it still feels un-Starfleet. They know Jean-Luc is alive, they can probably figure out where he is, so why don't you send a team? And if that team gets caught, say they went rogue as well. Hell, make a dog and pony show of it. Have whomever is going after the captain resign in protest, and after you have this paper trail, go for it. I mean, I kind of get it. He's preparing for a war, he wants all the people he can get, but it was the wrong call. I think Riker was right. It's the only time he's right in the entire 2 episodes. In the end, after everything I've seen, I fully believe that Starfleet probably kept the majority of their fleet as scientists that were meant to be diplomats and explorers to find strange new worlds. But in the background, they did have a stable of wartime captains that could be called in when things got too tough. I also think that Nechev, for all her faults, was probably a wartime admiral to most degrees, even if she was an idiot in Deep Space Nine that one time. But all of these are my opinions. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget, people, all of our lives are a story. Make yours a good one.